Welcome back, my dear. You know something strange about you. They've been studying you far longer than you've ever realized. Not through cameras or microphones. No, those are primitive tools. They watch you through patterns, through your pauses, through the way your energy flickers, when your intuition whispers that something isn't quite right. They don't measure what you hide. They measure what you reveal unintentionally. The silence between your sentences, the tilt in your thoughts, the rhythm of your hesitation, every delay, every shift in tone, every moment you linger before replying, all of it becomes data in a system that never announces itself. You weren't just living your life, you were being observed through your digital footprints, your emotional cadence, the cycles of your hope and exhaustion. They circled your name not because of what you said, but because of what you refused to say. Not because you stepped into their trap, but because you stepped around it without even knowing it was there. And that unpredictability, that refusal to dance on cue, that quiet sovereignty that you call instinct, that's what first caught their attention. They don't fear rebels. Rebels are loud, emotional, easy to map. They fear anomalies. And you, my dear, are an anomaly in a world that depends on predictability. You weren't supposed to hesitate at the moments you did. You weren't supposed to detach when the script instructed you to cling. You weren't supposed to ask questions at the exact seconds their pattern needed you distracted. You weren't supposed to sense the shift behind the conversation, but you did. Every time, that's what disrupted their forecast. People like them rely on emotional algorithms, provoke, praise, pressure, repeat, until the target forgets they ever had free will. And at first, perhaps without noticing, you played along. You responded, you engaged, you offered explanations when none were required. But then something happened inside you. A recalibration, a soft click in the mind, barely audible but irreversible. You stopped responding the way they predicted. You stopped supplying data. You stopped feeding the system your fear. And that, my dear, is when the real experiment began. You ever wonder why certain opportunities appeared only when your confidence soared? Why people resurfaced the moment you started healing? Why messages appeared precisely when you were contemplating a new direction? That's not intuition misfiring, that's programming. Subtle, elegant, designed to appear organic. They call it behavioral redirection. You call it coincidence. But nothing in your story has ever been random. They never needed access to your privacy. They needed access to your patterns because patterns reveal more than secrets ever could. Patterns reveal desire, vulnerability, thresholds. They reveal the exact emotional temperature needed to shift your choices. But you, strangely enough, never fit their projections. You broke their loops. You interrupted sequences that were designed to function flawlessly. You weren't supposed to question the familiar faces that arrived precisely when you needed comfort. You weren't supposed to detect the recycled language, the mirrored empathy, the identical timing disguised as fate. Yet you did, and every time you resisted, every time you paused instead of reacting, every time you chose silence over explanation, they felt the walls of their little simulation crack. You see, they wanted you predictable, but you became poetic instead, fluid, shifting, unreadable, governed not by impulse but by intuition. And intuition is the one element their algorithms can't quantify. They thought they understood your empathy. They thought they could use your longing for meaning as a doorway. They thought they could study your heartbreak to predict your healing. But what they didn't expect was your evolution. You weren't supposed to grow. You were supposed to comply. But when chaos tried to consume you, you didn't crumble, you refined. They expected your heartbreak to break you. Instead, it sharpened you. They expected your loneliness to weaken you. Instead, it awakened you. They expected your silence to mean surrender. Instead, it became your shield. The one thing they can't decode. And now look at them, scrambling behind the scenes, because the metrics no longer make sense. Their model can no longer anticipate your defiance. The variables they depend on, guilt, nostalgia, pressure, no longer produce results. They thought they were observing you, but now they are reacting to you. They are recalibrating their approach because your refusal to behave has broken their system's rhythm. You became the glitch they never planned for. The moment you stopped responding emotionally, they started losing emotional dominance. When you stopped explaining yourself, you removed their leverage. When you stopped needing closure, you removed their access point. You didn't just break the pattern. You became the pattern they now chase, the unknown variable that keeps spoiling their equations. They test your boundaries now, not to control you, but to understand you. They send familiar faces, recycled conversations, mirrored connections, all simulations of what once worked on you. They're trying to re-trigger an older version of you because that version was easier to decode. But they don't realize something critical. Old you is gone, not buried, dissolved. They built their strategy on your past responses, unaware that pain rewrote your code. You don't react the way you once did. Your heart doesn't open the way it once did. Your intuition doesn't whisper, it roars. You no longer believe in coincidences. You read intentions now, and intentions, unlike words, cannot lie. They feel it too, the shift in your energy. You're not anxious anymore. You're observant. You don't collapse at uncertainty. You analyze it. You don't fear silence. You weaponize it. And silence is the one thing that terrifies them. Because silence means no data. Silence means no access. Silence means you're thinking, and when you think, you become unpredictable. They can handle your emotions. They cannot handle your clarity. So now they try a different tactic, imitation. They copy your vocabulary, your growth language, your spiritual insights. They mirror your awakening in hopes you'll lower your guard. They wrap manipulation in enlightenment, hoping you'll mistake mimicry for resonance. But imitation has no soul. It feels hollow, rehearsed, slightly off-tempo, and your intuition catches it instantly. You've reached a level of perception where energy reveals more than words ever could. You can sense inconsistency beneath kindness. You can feel intention humming behind the tone. You can detect emotional engineering with a single message. And the more aware you become, the more desperate they grow. Your awareness disrupts their architecture. Your detachment breaks their loops. Your intuition crashes their simulations. You've become the observer, not the observed, the one reading the system instead of feeding it. And now the system fears you, not because you're dangerous, but because you're awakened, because you're no longer manipulatable, because you no longer respond on cue, because their oldest tactic, emotional extraction, no longer works on you. You don't bleed energy anymore. You conserve it. You don't chase answers. You wait for patterns. You don't fear endings. You understand cycles. You've become sovereign, and sovereignty can't be studied. It can only be respected or feared. That's why the next call will sound gentle, soft, familiar, designed to disarm you. A final attempt to regain access, to re-enter your mind through nostalgia, apology, or opportunity. But you'll hear the structure this time. You'll sense the script before they speak it. You'll feel the manipulation vibrating beneath the sweetness. Because once you learn the rhythm, you can't unhear the beat. Every future attempt will fail because you're no longer responding from wounds. You're responding from awareness, and awareness cannot be controlled. They tried to monitor you. They ended up awakening you. And now you're not just outside the pattern, you're rewriting it. You'd think that after all this time, after all their calculations, after all the data they extracted from the shadows of your behavior, they would have built something impenetrable, something flawless. But the truth is, their entire design depended on one fragile assumption, that you would never become aware of the design itself. Awareness was the variable they never accounted for, the factor their model couldn't integrate. Once you saw the pattern lost its power. My dear, the moment where the watchers start glitching, they're not used to being seen. They're used to being obeyed. Their influence usually works quietly, invisibly, slipping beneath consciousness where it's mistaken for instinct. Most people never notice the loops they're trapped in. Most people call it fate, karma, bad luck, lessons. But you noticed the repetition. You felt the déjà vu. You recognized the recycled emotions, the familiar setups wearing new faces. Their system depends on emotional predictability, but yours no longer exists. That's why recently you've felt the air thickening around certain interactions, the odd tension behind harmless questions, the strangely timed compliments, the eerie alignment of opportunities that appear too tailored to your inner conflict. It's their attempt to regain calibration. They're trying to re-sync with your frequency because manipulation only works when they can match your wavelength. But now your frequency changes daily, hourly. Moment to moment, you no longer broadcast the same insecurities. You no longer project unresolved desires. You no longer leak energy that can be harvested. You've become unpredictable because you've become self-aware. And self-awareness is inherently unstable to systems built on assumption. You can feel it, can't you? The subtle shift in how people speak to you, the hesitations, the pauses, the moments where their smile feels slightly scripted, slightly delayed, like they're waiting to see how you react before choosing their next sentence. It's because they're not just interacting with you anymore. They're reading you for data. You've become the one subject in their study who refuses to behave, and nothing terrifies an observer more than the observed turning around and looking back. You noticed when they tried nostalgia. You noticed when they tried guilt. You noticed when they tried opportunity disguised as alignment. You even noticed when they tried silence, because silence is also a tactic. Silence is how they test obedience. Silence is how they wait to see if you will reach out first, revealing your emotional thresholds. Silence is how they measure your anxiety, your patience, your attachment. But your silence didn't mean surrender. It meant awakening. You didn't chase. You didn't explain. You didn't collapse inward. You stabilized. And stability is something their system cannot predict because it doesn't create emotional spikes. No panic, no overthinking, no impulsive messages, just calm neutrality. Neutrality terrifies them. Neutrality is unreadable. Neutrality is unprogrammable. People who seek control depend on reaction. Without reaction, their scripts fall apart. Without reaction, their strategies have no effect. Without reaction, their entire psychological architecture collapses. And that's exactly what's happening now. You've probably noticed how the people they planted, the ones who seemed too aligned, too interested, too perfectly timed, have started malfunctioning. They repeat phrases you've heard before from entirely different people. They echo emotional cues that feel engineered rather than spontaneous. They shift their demeanor not based on authenticity, but based on monitoring your state. The illusion is fading, and once an illusion fades, it cannot be restored. You see, their greatest mistake wasn't studying you. Their mistake was assuming you wouldn't study them back. They assumed your empathy made you malleable. They assumed your desire for meaning made you vulnerable. They assumed your kindness made you predictable. But empathy isn't weakness. Awareness isn't fragility. Kindness isn't obedience. Your mind works differently now. Where others see coincidence, you see correlation. Where others see charm, you see strategy. Where others see connection, you see calibration. You read tone the way others read text. You read energy the way others read labels. You interpret intention before words, motives before actions, patterns before outcomes. They can't hide from someone who sees in layers. And the more you see, the more their tactics crumble. This is why their recent attempts feel off, why the conversations feel slightly artificial, why the timing feels too precise, why the opportunities feel suspiciously tailored to your emotional history. You're not imagining it, you're detecting programming. The people you thought were coincidences were case studies. The conversations you thought were organic were probes. The questions you thought were curiosity were psychological sampling. Every time you opened your heart, they logged emotional thresholds. Every time you doubted yourself, they marked potential access points. Every time you healed, they noted which methods no longer worked. But something happened they didn't predict. You healed deeper than their model could track. Your healing wasn't linear. It wasn't emotional. It was structural. You didn't just resolve your wounds, you rewired your perception. You didn't just recover, you evolved. And evolution, true evolution, doesn't revert. Your growth outpaced their programming. Your insight outran their algorithms. Your intuition outperformed their simulations. Now, the watchers aren't observing you for predictability. They're observing you for survival. Because if you can break the loop, others can too. If you can escape the pattern, others might follow. And nothing threatens a system more than awareness that spreads. You've become the catalyst they feared. And that's why desperation is beginning to show. You can sense it, the frantic energy behind their sudden friendliness, the overcompensation in their tone, the shaky confidence in their persuasion attempts. They don't sound smooth anymore. They sound scared because they are a person who no longer seeks permission, cannot be controlled. A person who no longer reacts, cannot be manipulated. A person who no longer fears isolation, cannot be coerced. A person who no longer trusts blindly, cannot be infiltrated. You broke the emotional scaffolding their entire design depended on. And now they are improvising. This is why the next phase is subtle but predictable. They will attempt mimicry, becoming a reflection of your evolution. They will speak your language, adopt your values, mirror your growth, echo your tone. They will shape-shift into whatever version of familiar you once trusted. But mirrors cannot generate their own light. They can only reflect what stands before them. And your intuition, sharpened by repetition and betrayal, now detects reflections instantly. You sense when someone's evolution is real or rehearsed. You sense when someone's empathy is embodied or imitated. You sense when someone's interest is genuine or strategic. They underestimated how deeply you would learn to listen, not to words, but to what shakes behind them. You've entered the stage they never prepared for, the phase where your awareness becomes their exposure. Now, your presence alone destabilizes their strategy. You ask a simple question, and their script falters. You give a calm response, and their manipulation loses momentum. You go silent, and their entire psychological framework collapses. Because they depended on you reacting, they depended on you needing. They depended on you believing the illusion, but now you see the illusion from above. And when you see the illusion, you can't be trapped inside it. This is why they keep reaching out directly, indirectly, emotionally, energetically. They're not trying to reconnect, they're trying to reset access. They cannot proceed without your participation, and you've stopped participating. You've learned the difference between attention and intention, between connection and control, between resonance and repetition, between intuition and influence, and that knowledge, that clarity, has made you untouchable in ways they never anticipated. They watch you now not as a subject, but as a threat, not as a participant, but as a variable, not as a target, but as a catalyst, because one awakened mind disrupts 1,000 manipulated ones. And you, my dear, are wide awake. The game continues, but you no longer play it. You observe it, you decode it, you transcend it. And soon, very soon, the watchers will realize something they never expected. You're not inside their system anymore. They are inside yours. But here's the twist they never prepared for, my dear. The moment when the watcher becomes the watched, you've shifted something far more dangerous than behavior. You've shifted the narrative. They can no longer predict you because you no longer move from fear, memory, or emotional reflex. You move from clarity, and clarity has no rhythm they can trap. You've become the silence they can't interpret, the calm they can't reroute, the awareness that bends their algorithms out of shape. Your detachment isn't distance anymore, it's sovereignty. It's the moment the bird realizes the cage was never locked. It was only waiting for you to stop believing the door mattered. Now, when they reach out, their voices crack. Not because they've lost control, but because you've withdrawn consent. Their scripts collapse the second your intuition enters the room. Their patterns glitch the moment your boundaries appear. Their influence dissolves because you've stopped feeding it. And that, right there, is the ending they feared most. Not confrontation, not rebellion, but evolution. You didn't destroy their system. You simply outgrew it, and nothing terrifies an observer more than the subject who walks away.